So, if you had to drop a pin on the exact center of human civilization, where would it go?
Oh, wow. Most people immediately think of like Silicon Valley.
Right, writing the code for tomorrow, or maybe Wall Street, moving trillions of dollars, or Tokyo syncing up 30 million people into this perfect high-speed rhythm.
Yeah, the usual suspect.
Exactly. But what if the true test of human progress wasn't actually happening in some billion-dollar data center, but on a freezing, snow-covered street in northern Japan?
It's such a radical shift in perspective because we're so conditioned to measure civilization by its speed, right? Like its output, its ability to invent the future.
Yeah, the big flashy stuff.
Exactly. We look at these massive upstream decisions, the big investments, tech breakthroughs, geopolitics, but we almost never look downstream, at the actual point of impact.
And that is exactly what we're doing today. We are going on a deep dive into this really intricate set of architectural and systems observations, specifically looking at a framework called the City Observation Architecture.
Yeah, the COA.
Right. And the mission for this deep dive is to investigate a totally different way to measure our modern world. So, not by its power to generate the future, but by its physical capacity to just, well, keep people alive.
To sustain everyday life without collapsing, which is huge.
Exactly. We're going to look at how those giant upstream civilizational functions ultimately become the living conditions that you and I actually experience every single day.
And to do that, the source material does this really cool thing where it breaks the globe down into like an anatomical map.
Right, like a body.
Exactly. It argues that civilization isn't just this homogeneous blob of human activity. It functions like a body with highly specialized organs or nodes that are distributed all across the planet.
Okay, let's unpack this map because this is where the friction really starts to make sense.
Mhm.
So the sources identify San Francisco as the direction node, which that makes total sense.
Yeah, the entrepreneurs in the capital gather there to kind of point the compass.
Yeah.
They decide where the future is going.
Right. And then you have Northern Virginia identified as the computation node.
Which is an interesting distinction. Notice how the text separates the software from the physical reality here. The computation node isn't just like this abstract cloud.
It's actual heavy physical muscle.
Right. It is the massive concentration of data centers, the power grids, the cooling towers, all those fiber optic cables that actually physically power artificial intelligence and the internet.
Okay, so then we have Singapore as the circulation node, managing the massive global flow of logistics, finance, cargo. And finally, Tokyo is the synchronization node,
Taking all those massive populations and corporate timeframes and locking them into one unified rhythm.
one high-speed rhythm, yeah.
Yeah.
So you have direction, power, flow, and timing.
Those are your upstream organs making the big decisions.
But wait, San Francisco, Northern Virginia, Singapore, Tokyo, these are all massive global economic juggernauts. But the sources introduce a final crucial piece of the puzzle, which is Sapporo, Japan.
Yeah, which usually throws people off.
Right. Sapporo is famous for a snow festival and beer. How on earth does a regional snowy city end up on the exact same anatomical map as Silicon Valley?
Well, because you can't have a functioning body with just a brain and a nervous system. Sapporo represents what the framework calls the living membrane node.
Okay, let me try to synthesize this with an analogy. So if San Francisco is the steering wheel deciding where the car goes,
Yep.
and Northern Virginia is the engine generating the horsepower, and Singapore is the transmission managing the flow of that power.
And Tokyo is the timing belt, right?
Right, keeping it perfectly synced.
Yeah.
So Sapporo is where the rubber actually meets the road to see if the car can drive in the snow.
That is exactly it. The steering wheel and the engine are entirely useless if the tires can't actually grip the pavement.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
What's fascinating here is that we usually treat everyday life as a passive endpoint, like just the bottom of the trickle-down effect. A tech company in California pushes a software update, and eventually a consumer somewhere just taps a screen.
Right, we just receive it.
But this model violently rejects that passive view. The living membrane everyday life is the contact surface.
The sources actually define this explicitly as the place where the benefits and burdens of civilization are translated into the body, into time, cost, and mobility.
It's the ultimate test environment. Everyday life is where civilization actively reproduces itself. If the direction node and the computation node decide to push a massive new AI agenda, it literally means nothing until it is tested as a condition of sustainable living on this membrane.
Right, like, can a human being actually live with the physical results of that upstream decision?
Exactly. Can they afford the sudden surge in energy costs? Can they still move through their city?
Think about this in terms of your own daily life. You know, anyone listening to this has probably experienced a version of this at work. Let's say upper management, your company's direction node, decides to pivot to a brand new software system overnight.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Right. They send out this shiny email about efficiency. But you, the employee, are the membrane. You're the one who has to spend 6 months painfully adjusting your daily workflow, finding workarounds for the glitches, and basically absorbing all the friction just to keep the business functioning.
You are translating their abstract decision into a physical reality.
Exactly.
And that is the exact dynamic, just scaled up to the level of global civilization. Abstract civilizational changes are forced to become physical, human realities.
Which brings us back to the map. Out of all the cities in the world, why use Sapporo, this city in northern Japan, as the ultimate lens to observe this membrane?
It's because of the cold.
The cold?
Yeah. In a mild climate, the requirements for maintenance are practically invisible. You might not notice how deeply dependent you are on your city's infrastructure if the power flickers on like a 70-degree spring day.
Sure, you just open a window.
Right. But in a harsh, snowy climate, maintenance cannot be hidden. Daily life in Sapporo depends on the continuous, unbroken coordination of massive systems.
Heating, huge snow removal operations, winter logistics, public transportation, healthcare access during a literal blizzard.
Yes. If any one of those systems fails in the dead of winter, the membrane doesn't just bend, it instantly tears.
People freeze.
People freeze, food doesn't arrive. The text emphasizes a really crucial insight here. Calmness does not mean nothing is happening. When you look out at a quiet, snowy morning in a city like Sapporo, and the traffic is moving and the houses are warm.
That peace is not the default state of nature.
Not at all. That calmness means massive hidden maintenance systems successfully reconnected overnight.
The sources refer to this as the compensation layer, right?
Yes. Think about how a car's suspension system works. When you hit a deep pothole, the tire drops violently, the shocks compress, the metal groans. Massive physical force is absorbed.
But inside the cabin, you barely feel a bump.
Right. The coffee in your cup holder barely even ripples. The driver gets to experience a smooth ride only because a hidden layer of mechanics took all the damage.
So the municipal government's constantly adjusting snowplow routes in real time. The transportation operators absorbing delays to keep the schedule somewhat intact. The logistics workers driving trucks through zero visibility blizzards.
Exactly. The healthcare workers, the building managers keeping pipes from bursting, they are the suspension system.
They are constantly adjusting to the friction of the environment to keep the peace for everyone else. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's apply some serious pressure to that suspension system.
Let's do it.
The sources spend a lot of time on what happens when the upstream nodes, San Francisco and Northern Virginia, start pushing the current massive agenda, which is artificial intelligence and this insatiable demand for data centers.
Right, because from an upstream perspective, a place like Sapporo looks like an untapped gold mine for this.
How so?
Well, it has a cold climate, which means you don't have to spend a fortune cooling the massive servers. And it has space. It looks like the perfect place to build the physical infrastructure of AI.
Wait, let me push back on this for a second. If San Francisco or global tech giants decide to funnel billions of dollars into a regional city to build data centers, shouldn't that be a massive win?
You would think so, yeah.
I mean, it brings construction, jobs, tax revenue. How does a giant pile of investment capital cause friction on the membrane?
Because of how that capital physically manifests on the ground. We tend to view AI simply as this abstract software growth industry. But a data center arriving on the membrane instantly stops being a technological narrative and becomes a physical pressure cooker.
Right. The sources call this a profound velocity mismatch.
Exactly. Investment narratives and policy language move at literal lightning speed. Someone in the direction node wires $1 billion in a fraction of a second.
But physical living infrastructure, the power grids, housing developments, transportation networks, that moves incredibly slower.
So slowly. Let's walk through the mechanics of that. The capital for the data center arrives instantly. But upgrading a regional power grid to handle the massive electrical draw of those servers, that takes 10 years.
Wow, yeah. Building insulated housing for the sudden influx of specialized tech workers takes years.
Right, the physical reality just massively lags behind the financial expectation. So the new data center starts sucking up existing electricity allocation. It tests the absolute capacity of the local power grid, which might actually lead to higher utility costs for the locals who are just trying to heat their homes.
And the new highly paid tech workers need places to live, so they bid up the limited supply of winterized housing. Land prices spike.
And here is the real kicker for the membrane. The massive demand for construction labor to build these facilities completely drains the local workforce.
Oh, I see. A worker who used to, like, drive a snowplow for the city or maintain the local roads might quit to take a higher-paying job pouring concrete for the data center.
Exactly. Suddenly, the local compensation layer is starved of labor. The pothole hits, but the suspension system has been stripped out to build a server farm.
That is wild. The expectation of the future arrived instantly, but the membrane's capacity to actually sustain it hasn't caught up at all.
Nope. And the locals are left absorbing the tension, the price spikes, and the resource strain, just trying to live their daily lives. The future arrives, but it arrives in a waiting state, causing violent friction on the ground.
Okay, looking at Sapporo through this lens, it is clearly less synchronized with those high-speed capital and tech systems than, say, Tokyo or San Francisco.
Yeah.
The rhythm is fundamentally different. But doesn't low synchronization just mean they are falling behind?
That's the common assumption.
Right. Like, if you aren't synced to the fastest speed of the global market, aren't you just suffering from talent outflow, fewer economic opportunities, and basically being deprioritized for future infrastructure?
That is the standard aggressive economic assumption. If you aren't sprinting at maximum efficiency, you are failing. But the source material offers a brilliant dual meaning for low synchronization. Yes, it definitely means a weaker connection to high-speed capital. But, crucially, it preserves something arguably more important, which is recovery capacity.
Civilization recovery capacity. Let's break down the mechanics of how low synchronization actually preserves that.
Okay, look at a highly synchronized system like Tokyo. Millions of people, corporate timelines, transportation systems, they are locked into this hyper-efficient cycle.
Every train runs to the exact second.
Exactly. There's zero slack in the system. The sources use a biological concept here called chronic depolarization.
Depolarization, like how a cell fires.
Yes. Think about a heart muscle cell. For a heartbeat to happen, the cell has to depolarize. It has to physically fire and contract. But for the heart to keep beating over a lifetime, that cell must have a fraction of a second to repolarize.
For rest?
It has to reset. If a muscle fiber is chronically depolarized, if it is constantly receiving stimuli to fire with zero slack, zero rest, it seizes up in a cramp. It fails.
Oh, wow. So a perfectly synchronized city operates like a chronically depolarized muscle.
Yeah.
It is always on, always reacting to high-speed microstimuli.
Exactly. When a single train is 2 minutes late, the lack of slack means the disruption cascades through the entire system. It shatters.
So a living membrane like Sapporo maintains a distance from that permanent high-speed competition. By not being perfectly synchronized to hyperspeed, it preserves spatial room physical space to maneuver.
And it preserves temporal room time to breathe and adjust. The fluctuations, the little inefficiencies, the extra time it takes to get things done that isn't noise. That is the very source of civilizational stability.
That makes so much sense. If you aren't sprinting on a treadmill 24 hours a day, you actually have the bodily resources to heal when you pull a muscle. Low synchronization allows disconnection and recovery to coexist with daily life.
Right. A completely synchronized system maximizes short-term efficiency, but completely loses long-term adaptability. It loses the ability to absorb a massive shock and return to a stable state.
Speaking of massive shocks, we really have to address one of the biggest ones currently hitting this membrane, which is population decline. We usually look at demographic decline through these macro statistics, right?
Oh, totally. We look at a spreadsheet and say, the national population is shrinking by 2%, or the citywide average is dropping slightly.
Yeah, it sounds so manageable.
But viewing population decline through a citywide average is incredibly misleading. Density doesn't evaporate evenly across a city like a puddle drying in the sun. It happens violently on the micro-reality of the membrane.
So what does this actually mean on the ground? Let's walk through a micro scenario of how this tears the membrane. Imagine a specific, slightly isolated neighborhood of 50 people. The citywide data says the population is down 2%. Statistically, that's just one person leaving that neighborhood.
Barely a blip.
Right. On a spreadsheet in the direction node, a one-person loss looks perfectly stable. But what if that one person was the only guy in the neighborhood who owned a heavy-duty snowplow truck?
Oh, man. Or the only person who ran the local logistics delivery route. Or the primary care nurse at the local clinic.
Exactly. The city stats look totally fine, but mechanically, that specific neighborhood's membrane just suffered a catastrophic tear. The condensation layer completely vanished. The next time a blizzard hits, that neighborhood can no longer physically connect to the grocery store or the hospital.
Because the membrane isn't one solid, indestructible sheet. It frays in highly specific, localized spots. A single transportation route suddenly doesn't have enough riders, so the bus schedule is cut.
A neighborhood loses the able-bodied residents needed to physically dig out the fire hydrants.
Right. When the people in the compensation layer, those hidden shock absorbers, disappear, the city loses its ability to recover.
So sitting in a boardroom in Silicon Valley or Tokyo, you might look at a data set of Sapporo and see a stable environment ready for investment. But down on the ground, the living membrane is thinning out dangerously in specific functional areas.
And the thing is, unless you exist entirely in a theoretical void, you live on a contact surface. We all do.
We really do. Whether it's the sudden spike in the cost of heating your home because a new industrial project strained the local grid, or, the speed at which your workplace expects you to respond to emails on a Sunday because the corporate timing belt sped up, you are the membrane.
You are the physical location where upstream civilizational choices become exhausting physical realities.
So if we connect this all back to the bigger picture, it fundamentally changes how we should evaluate the success of our society. A civilization's true stability isn't measured by how fast it can generate a new technological era.
No, it is measured by its recovery rate, its ability to absorb friction, handle the velocity mismatches of new capital, and sustain human life without breaking.
Can the membrane successfully reconnect all those hidden compensatory systems after a massive shock, allowing daily life to continue calmly the next morning?
That is the true metric of a functional civilization.
Right. And how stay warm and can the roads get cleared? Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over long after this deep dive ends. Our global civilization is deeply, deeply obsessed with the direction and computation nodes.
Absolutely.
We prioritize blistering speed, perfectly synchronized efficiency, and the ruthless elimination of all friction. But by optimizing our world to process data a millisecond faster, are we accidentally stripping away the very slack, that hidden recovery capacity that actually keeps our daily lives from collapsing when the winter comes?